Good day, all. Today's a great topic, I think. It's always good to have a refresher on financial aid and aid in general, right, Amy from Gwen and
Yep.
Mercy? Um, Amy, tell me real quick all about some good things about Gwen and Mercy University.
Yeah, so we're a small private Catholic institution founded by the Sisters of Mercy. We are rolling admissions, so if students are still interested in completing an application, there's plenty of time. For any student who's completed an application, we're rolling through. We have like I said, we're a small institution, so we're about 2,000 total students. So for anybody who's looking for a small community, that's really what we're here for.
Online too, right? Online availability.
Yep, some online options for students. Biggest programs, nursing, education, health professions. So for those students who are looking for those programs, we're a great option.
Okay, Gwen and Mercy University, good stuff. All right, Amy, you know these topics well, so let's go. These are a few questions, concerns from parents, at least in my world. I'm sure you can relate. But here's the first one. The perception is not qualifying for financial aid or aid in general. And the question is, why submit to FAFSA at all? That's coming from a parent.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, right? Like, why take the time to do it if I'm not going to get anything out of it? The first thing is, um, you could qualify for aid. The FAFSA is complicated. So just because you think you won't qualify for aid doesn't mean you won't. There's lots of different grants that are offered through the federal government. And especially for those families who say, I had child one go into college and we got nothing, and now I have child two going into college, they take into consideration how many members of the household are in college. So sometimes that changes up, your overall eligibility for different types of aid. So with the simplified, and it's supposed to be easier FAFSA, if you can take a couple of minutes to fill it out and just see what you get. There's also the capacity for loans through the federal government. So if you're like, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get a private loan, maybe I won't qualify for a private educational loan, the federal government provides options for loans for students. So that's always an option, and they're going to offer that to everyone. The worst thing that comes out is you don't take anything from the FAFSA.
You
Um,
don't know till you try, right?
yeah, you never know until you try. And some institutions require having that SAI just on file to consider you for
Now
other.
tell everybody what that means in case they don't know.
Yeah, SAI is the new index, the student aid index, which is given to you when you complete the FAFSA. So for some institutions, they have to have a value in that student aid index to consider you for other institutional aid. So even if you're not getting anything from the FAFSA necessarily, they may need to have that information on file so that they can give you more merit scholarships or scholarships from the college as well. So it's worthwhile to do it because more opportunities open up for you.
Absolutely. So I think sometimes there's lack of education among schools and we'll say high schools in general. Where does the parent start? I know we talked about that before, but step one, completing that aid application. Where do they go for step one?
Yeah, studentaid.gov. So the FAFSA is typically something that students and families complete online. Now, I will say for students and families that are in different situations in terms of like DACA or undocumented, there is also a paper FAFSA that some institutions will take and evaluate themselves if the federal government maybe can't process your FAFSA for
Interesting.
whatever reason that is. So there is actually a paper FAFSA that you can complete, but probably 95% of people who are eligible will complete the FAFSA online through studentaid.gov. And I always tell students the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. So if you ever jump onto a website and it says for $40, we'll file your FAFSA, don't do it. The first F in FAFSA is free, so you should never pay for it.
Can you imagine the amount of people I'm guessing that do that just because they don't know?
Yeah, and
Wow.
if you think they're going to get some extra help or it's going to be
Yeah.
fulfilled, it takes some time, but it's free if you do it on your own.
Gotcha. So when should the student file, parent/student file?
Yeah, so typically the FAFSA opens in the fall of the student's senior year. So I do get parents ask me, can I go ahead and fill it out? My student's a junior. We kind of want to see what our aid is. I mean, you can if you want a trial run just to go through the FAFSA, but the institutions are not going to be pulling in that information until your student's senior year. So it's usually the fall of the student's senior year, normally
Yeah.
October, but it varies.
Yeah. All right. Well, so this kind of goes in sync with what you just said in part. Does a college have to admit the student before financial aid?
That's a great question. So you can complete the FAFSA anytime. You will typically not be presented with a financial aid offer letter, like a financial aid package, until your student is accepted. So do the FAFSA as soon as you can, even if you're waiting for decisions and things like that. That should hinder you completing the application, but you likely won't get that full offer letter, that full financial aid package from an institution until your student has been accepted.
Gotcha. Okay. So does one have to reapply every year, or is it one application for the 4 years?
Every year. So put that reminder on your calendar for that early part of October. Fill it out every year. The nice thing about that, I know it's a pain. Everybody's like, I can't
Mhm.
believe it. Nothing's changed. The one time something changes, you're going to want to make sure that you fill it out every year. So even if nothing has changed, wonderful. But yes, every year that you have a student in college.
Okay. Okay. So does the parent and student both need to complete the application?
Yes, so both the parent and the student, well, you can work together to complete the application, but both the parent and the student need to sign it. So students and parents need to create that FSA ID through the FAFSA website, so through studentaid.gov. You can complete that even before the FAFSA opens. So if you're twiddling your thumbs in August and you're like, I wonder what we can do as we're thinking about what colleges we want to apply for, the number one thing that you can do is complete that FSA ID. It's typically your email address. So just make sure, mom and dad, that you're using your email address for yours and that your student is using their email address for theirs, because they will not let you duplicate email addresses for signatures. And students, a really, really important thing to remember, because you're using your email address, I know you're super used to using that school email address that you have. Don't for the FAFSA. Use a personal email address, amy.huffstetlercollege@gmail.com, whatever the case
But
is,
why though? Why?
because once you graduate from high
Yep.
school, that email is disconnected. So you're no longer able to use it. So if there are updates to your FAFSA or updates that you need to make to your FAFSA, or the next year when you're going in to do the FAFSA again, you won't be able to access that email. And it's also just nice to have a specific college email. I think you and I talked about this in another session that we did, but just having like a college email that you provide to every college, that here's where all my college information is coming, and your inbox is not inundated with college information and you're trying to track your Amazon package. Like, find that email address that works for you, that okay, this is where all of my college information is going to come.
That is great advice. Definitely. Yeah. Not to mention all the spam everybody gets, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So is a student a dependent or independent when completing this application?
That's a great question. There are 90% of students are dependent based on the FAFSA. Okay. Independence and dependence for the federal government doesn't necessarily mean the same thing that we think it means. So for independent students, they're typically what we would consider like a non-traditional student. So they're over the age of 25, they have dependents. It's a handful of things, but most traditional aged students are going to be dependent. and which means that their parents will have to provide their information on the FAFSA.
Yeah. So which means they're probably living at home, right? And
Living at home, their parents are contributing at least 50%, all of those things.
okay. Okay. So this gets a little muddy here. It's kind of a common but not common question. Parents that are separated or divorced, which parent is responsible for filing, or is it both if they're separated or divorced?
Yeah, that you're right. It does get a little muddy here. Typically, it's one of two things. Typically, it's the household that the student resides in should be completing the FAFSA, or it's the person who claimed the student on their taxes.
Okay.
So if those two things are the same person, so if student lives with mom and mom claims student on taxes, perfect. That's the household that they should be using. If student resides with mom, but dad claimed on the taxes, then perhaps dad should complete the FAFSA. Check with your financial aid office. I always encourage students, like, check with your financial aid office of the institution that you're applying to and just confirm. They can give you the best feedback in terms of what you're doing. And for, separated parents or divorced parents, if you go back and forth, maybe one person claims 1 year, the next person claims the next year, the next person claims the next year. Just kind of be aware that you may have different responsibilities each year, and your financial aid packages may look a little bit different each year if parent 1 files 1 year and parent 2 files the next year.
Woo, I can get muddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little
Okay.
complicated, yeah.
A little complicated, but get through it, right? Thumbs up. So this kind of was on the agenda, sort of kind of not what, because parents sometimes don't want to put all the cards on the table, right? When they're completing the application, and that would mean their assets. They feel like they're getting penalized sometimes for the more they have, the less they're going to get back in return, and that may be. But where can they? Like, I don't know. Like, what do they have to disclose, and what don't they have to disclose?
Yeah, so typically the information that is asked of a family is their tax information. So if you've disclosed it on your taxes, it's going to be disclosed on the FAFSA, generally, because more often than not, the FAFSA is able to pull information directly from the IRS to make sure that all of the boxes are correct. That helps the person who's completing the FAFSA, because how many people know off the top of their head their adjusted gross index, income, right? So nobody, I know I don't. So that helps when you can pull that information directly in. But the other thing that I would say for students and families that have a change, or maybe they had an asset. So when you complete the FAFSA, you're using your tax information from 2 years ago, right? It's prior year taxes. So this year, the students who are completing the 2025 FAFSA, they're using their taxes from 2022. The benefit of that is most people have completed their taxes, they're filed, even if you needed an extension or whatever the case, it's done. But we also recognize that things can change in 2 years. Maybe there was a job loss, maybe there's a difference in assets, maybe you had to get rid of something, or you acquired something else, right? So if there is a difference in perhaps what happened in 2 years ago to now, again, you should communicate with your financial aid office, because the information that's going to be pulled in is from 2 years ago. If you had a job loss or a reduction in income between that time and today, when you're completing your FAFSA, reach out to your financial aid office. Many financial aid offices can do things like a professional judgment or different things like that, where they can sort of modify the FAFSA based on where you currently are. So stay in touch with financial aid, I guess, is the short of that long explanation.
Sure. What about guardians, though? Legal guardians, or maybe not legal guardians at the time? I know I'm getting deep here, but I just was thinking of that real quick.
Yeah, legal guardians are easy because they're like parents, right? So legal guardians, they would provide the same information that a parent would. If you were under guardianship of someone other than your parents, but it's not legal, They're actually, again, you can go by household. So that person can put their information into the FAFSA. If you don't have parents, then again, you may qualify as an independent student, which would not require you to put information on the FAFSA.
Mm.
So it's really important how students complete those first couple of demographic pages that are on the FAFSA, because that in the background, the computer's saying, based on this information, we need parent information. Based on this information, we don't need parent information. And
Right.
ask some of those questions at the very beginning.
Okay, so you're saying the look back is 2 years. What if the family, and you kind of touched on this, but if the situation changed, for example, the job loss like right now or when they're applying, or whatever catastrophe, whatever inconvenience arose, that doesn't matter right now, right?
Right. So it certainly won't impact your FAFSA right now unless you tell, unless the financial aid office. For example, I have a student that I've been working with. She 2 years ago, she had two parents. Since she's lost a parent, right? So that's a loss of income, right? And so the biggest thing that I said to her was, let's stay in touch, make sure you contact the financial aid office, because it may impact your financial aid. It may not, depending on what sort of income parent two was bringing in, but it may impact your financial aid. So if there was something that negatively and I'm saying this very specifically, if there's something that negatively impacted your household status financially since you filed the taxes 2 years ago, you should immediately let the financial aid office know.
Okay. Two last questions.
Mhm.
What about a dispute? Is there an opportunity to dispute, reply, challenge what you were offered?
From the institution itself or from the FAFSA?
Both, or either or.
Yeah, so the FAFSA is a little bit more challenging because they're pulling the information directly from your IRS documents.
The numbers don't lie, right?
The numbers don't lie. And students and families should know that institutions recognize, and this is part of the update of the FAFSA that happened this year, which caused so many delays. Previously, the SAI, the Student Aid Index, was called the Estimated Family Contribution. And families were getting that and saying, there's no way that I can contribute what the federal government is saying that I can contribute. And so that was part of this whole update, is because that's not an expected contribution, right? We know that most families can't just pull $30,000 out of their pocket and say, no problem, we'll take care of that. It is essentially more of a baseline for financial aid offices, right? To be able to say, okay, based on what information is pulled from the federal government, from the IRS, this is how we think we can package this student to make our institution affordable.
Yeah.
And so if you wanted to dispute a financial aid package, institutional aid, we think we should get more merit aid, we need more of this or this. Yes, reach out to your financial aid office. Many institutions have an appeal process, but getting in contact with that financial aid office is going to be your best bet in saying, I need to talk to somebody about what is happening with me financially in a way that is secure, and that they're going to be listening to your specific story. Whereas the FAFSA has to be a little bit broad because they have to take into consideration every single person in America who's applying for 3,000 colleges.
Right. So there is hope, right, regarding that.
Yes, and you should stay in touch with your folks on campus.
And I'm glad you said that, because sometimes people accept what even though they disagree with it, they accept it and move on. I do have a couple more, and I apologize.
No, that's okay.
I'm going to head too far. These are good things. Are the parents responsible for the loans thereafter?
So no, actually, the loans that come from the FAFSA, they're called Stafford loans. They are in the name of the student. So that is so there's pros and cons, right, to loans, but it's a great way for students to start building credit, because typically the repayment policy is you begin your repayment 4 years or, 4 years after you're done with, after you're done with college, right? So you
But
usually,
wait a minute, the loans don't start 4 years from then, right? It's usually 6 months.
it's usually there's a 6 months grace period, but if you're a freshman, your
Oh,
loan
yeah,
is not going to start
yeah,
immediately after your freshman year. It's going to start after you graduate or that you fall below part-time. So that's really the qualifier. Um,
sure.
but yeah, there's more grace, there's more repayment options, many different repayment options that the federal government offers. And I've had students that have worked out with their families. Mom and dad, if you pay the loans, here's how I'm going to pay you back. There's also a parent plus loan, a parent loan that students can take, or that parents and families can take through the federal government. And I've had parents that say, I'll take this out, but you're paying for it, Johnny, Sally, whoever. And so that's a way to sort of say, this is how, as a family, we can help to support you if that's a need. But figuring out with your student, here's the responsibility of paying it back.
Yeah. Well, with that said, I mean, listen, we're just talking shop here. It's only an opinion, but things are fine and dandy when they go through this process, whether the parents take it or they do it together, so on and so forth. They get through it, right? Thumbs up at the graduation, and then my point is, could be a lot of misunderstanding in terms of when that loan is due, who's paying for it, because I don't think, though, I think it happens a lot,
Mm-hmm.
right? What
Yeah,
would you give for that?
I would say so one, if you don't need to take out the loan, don't. That's the first one. First
Mm-hmm.
piece of advice. Second piece of advice, if you don't need to take out the totality of the loan, don't, right? If you just need $2,000, just take $2,000, even if you're offered $5,000. The third thing is really talk to your family, because sometimes the loans that are offered through the federal government are not better than the loan that you would get from your bank. Or I've had families that will, refinance or, remortgage their house or whatever, because those things make more sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is a family decision. Like, we can't advise you of any of those options. We can simply say, here are all of the options. We can't tell you what's better or worse, but there is a lot that goes into that. And it's a really stressful conversation. You have to have it,
Yeah.
right?
And I'm gonna put you off the hook here. So the
Yeah,
key is communication, right?
yeah, you have to have the conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, room and board
Yes.
and meal plans, is that included in aid?
So you can use aid to pay for your room and meal plan, but your tuition is always going to be prioritized. So
Mm-hmm.
your aid will always go towards paying your tuition first, and whatever is left will trickle down into housing and meal
All right. What about a failing grade? Does that impact the aid at all?
plan. So the short answer is no. One failing grade is not going to impact your overall financial aid. However, institutions are required to tell the federal government that students are making satisfactory academic progress towards a degree. So if you have many failing grades, which are pushing you off of track to graduate in 4 to 6 years, that's usually the breaking point. Then that may impact your financial aid. And don't forget, if you're taking out that loan, if you get an F and you have to retake that class, you just paid for that class twice out of
Yeah,
your money. So it's always important to think about that.
good point. So you, just to go 2 steps back, you were talking about part-time, full-time
Mm-hmm.
students eligibility, I guess. Now, if the student takes a break, say after their whatever year, after freshman, after sophomore year, takes a break or goes down part-time, do they have to start repaying back any part of the loan?
Yeah, so if they go to part-time, they won't. They would have to fall below part-time. So if they truly take a break and they say, I'm not taking classes, the repayment starts 6 months after that. If they go back to school, there is a process called deferment. So when they enroll back into classes, it will essentially hold the payments that are due. Now it'll still accrue interest and all of that, but it'll hold the payments until then the student completes or again falls below halftime.
Do they have to go back to the online application, readjust?
Depends on how long of a break they took. So most institutions, if they take one semester, it's okay. But if they're out for an entire year, they would have to reapply.
Okay. All right. Last question.
Yeah.
So, mom, student, dad, whoever, we now complete the online application, and we're like, oh, we forgot this, or we did something wrong, and we know it. Can I go back and change it real quick?
Yes. So you can log back into the FAFSA and make what they call corrections. Just be aware that the corrections file through the system to your financial aid office the same way as your regular FAFSA does. So you may initially get a package, financial aid offer letter, that is based on the original information that you put in. And then once you submit your corrections, and usually after a couple of business days, then you will likely get a new financial aid offer with any updates that you made. So it's instantaneous in the system, like on the FAFSA, you'll see it, but the impact to your financial aid package may not be instantaneous.
Okay. So don't wait too long, right? If you're going to make changes.
Yes, do it when you can, and make sure, I always tell students at the very beginning, as you're completing your FAFSA, every institution that you're looking at. I mean, students can put, I think, up to 20 institutional school codes on their FAFSA.
What?
Every institution that you're thinking of, go ahead and throw it on there. Make sure that those institutions are getting your financial aid, your information, so that they can put together a package for you so that you can be a really good consumer, right? And make those considerations for what the financial aid packages look like from institution to institution.
Awesome. Amy from Gwinnett Mercer University. Thank you. Parents' key is to have 2 years of completed tax documents in front of you before you start this process.
Yes.
Hopefully. And heck, replay this video if you need to, just make sure you understand the fundamentals. Good stuff, Amy.
You got it.
All right. So till next time. All right.
Yeah, you got it. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
All right.